Hello, I'm Dr. James Bogash, Master of Health and Longevity and creator of Modern Health Myths. And today we're going to talk about this whole debacle, if you will, of cases going up and the panic that continues to follow this. Now, before we go into any of that, one of the things we need to understand, or you need to understand, is what PCR testing really is and what it really shows. Because unless we understand that, all we hear are that cases are going up without any real context. Now, PCR testing, what it basically does is understand that coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is an RNA virus. And so what we do is we find we have a DNA segment that matches the RNA segment. And then it goes through, once we do that, it goes through something called cycle thresholds. So basically, we're amplifying this, what we find. And there becomes the problem, because it's an amplifier. If you turn up an amplifier loud enough, you're going to start to hear stuff, but it doesn't always mean that that stuff is important or means anything. So back in the early days, 5 months ago, 6 months ago, it seems like a lifetime ago, but when we were doing most of the testing on people that were symptomatic. So when you do testing on people who are symptomatic and the testing comes back positive, there's a good chance that those people have the virus that's active and has the potential to infect other people. The problem is when we started testing asymptomatic people, this idea that we just need to test more people to get over this and get around this. I think the people that have promoted testing have no real, the general public, have no real idea of what testing involves and what PCR testing really says. So when we started testing asymptomatic people, that's when the game started changing and the data we have was no longer as relevant. So the problem being that we now know that the PCR test can still stay positive 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or longer after somebody's been infected. So let's say you're asymptomatic and you get an infection in the beginning of July, and July 15th, you happen to wake up and you go, oh, shit, I don't have anything else to do today. I'm going to go have a nasal or a con swab stuffed up my nose to see if I might be positive for coronavirus because I don't have anything else to do. And my insurance will cover it. So, so you go, you get tested, and it comes back positive. But if you were if you had the virus running through you and you were asymptomatic at the beginning of July, you are no longer infective. So on July 15th, 2 weeks, 15 days later, you may still test positive, but it doesn't mean that you can infect somebody with the virus. We can certainly talk about how long somebody can remain infective and how long they stay positive, but in general, 15 days later, you are no longer infective, but you can still test positive. So looking at things like the colleges when they started to return and the schools we start to return, and we start testing asymptomatic people, and we start panicking about the numbers and sheltering and shut things down. But the reality is those tests don't generally mean anything in somebody who doesn't have any symptoms. We're basically looking for a needle in a haystack, but what we may be finding is people who were symptomatic. Let's take these college students that went back in August. Maybe they went to some type of college party, pre-college party in 2 weeks before they went to school. They go to school, they get tested, and they're positive. And so we lock down everything and shut everything down. But that doesn't mean that that it means anything. So how can we look and see, like, am I just talking off the cuff? But what are we not seeing? At some point, we moved from hospitalizations and deaths to starting to talk about cases. Cases people still panic about. Before, if you remember way back when, it was all about hospitalizations and deaths. The thing, if you look almost everywhere across the country, across the globe, hospitalizations and deaths continue to trend downwards, regardless of what cases are doing. I'm going to post a couple articles, one of which is by Thomas Jefferson, not that Thomas Jefferson, but he was formerly the Cochrane Group, Cochrane Collaboration, somebody who I followed for quite a few years, and I have a lot of respect for what he has to say. And you can kind of read through some of that information, as well as the another website from another group that very smart people looking at some of the data and whether the second wave actually exists or whether we're just continuing to test and not actually having an increase in cases or hospitalizations. So this just continues to point the idea that we're not seeing increased hospitalizations and deaths in most areas. The only areas we probably will are the ones who didn't see them originally. And so we're not seeing a second wave. What we're seeing is the first wave that they locked down and they never got around to. But all the other areas with cases going up and hospitalizations and deaths continuing to trend downward, that certainly makes sense if we're talking about all these cases, these positive cases that are not actually infected. The term there would be a cold positive, that these people can't actually infect somebody. So, as I mentioned, I will put a link to those two particular studies in the comment section. Make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who you think needs the information, because they're still hiding out in a cave in their house, and subscribe to the channel.